Are you someone who avoids feeling difficult emotions at all costs, yet you're realizing that this kind of avoidance of difficult emotions is beginning to take its toll on you? Then welcome to this video in which I want to share with you some principles and practices for how you can gradually approach difficult emotions, and in doing so transform them and also gradually lose your fear of difficult emotions, which we all share. So my name is Dr. Christine Braehler. I'm a clinical psychologist and also a seasoned self-compassion teacher and teacher trainer. And the things that I share in this video I actually taught in the Mindful Self-Compassion program developed by Germer and Kristin Neff, which I've also contributed to developing. And so I'm kind of offering you how I teach this in the program. And everything I say here is actually evidence-based, which is great to know, reassuring to know, for me anyway. So please check out the references for the research in the description box below. So what I'm sharing here also, I wish that I would have known when I studied psychology. It wasn't taught at the time, and I hope that this is something that we all get to learn at school in the future, so we know how to deal with difficult emotions, which is such a core skill to have, to really be able to feel empowered to look after our mental health. Disclaimer, however, if you are struggling with really acute, severe distress, mental distress right now, please do not hesitate to seek out professional help where you are locally. You know, this is just so important. It's very, you know, to be honored and appreciated, to want to help ourselves, but sometimes, particularly when we don't really understand the distress and it's so acute, or you're actually suffering from a psychological disorder and it's kind of being triggered again, it's just so wise to get some professional support to make it all easier and hopefully more efficient to get the help that you need. So I assume that most of you maybe have begun to meditate or begun some sort of soul searching through therapy or just on your own, and you will have come across this pattern probably, that when we are experiencing a difficult emotion, may it be anxiety or sadness or shame or whatever, that or any other form of emotional distress, straight away our whole system is kind of saying, I don't want this. Like there's some form of what's called resistance, but it's really a hard-wired automatic reflex for fight, flight, or freeze, or even submit, which is basically a hardwired reflex to try and get rid of the pain that our organism is perceiving this as. So the same way that I would have cut myself and my system thinking, oh, you've got to take care of this cut, we also experience our system also perceives difficult emotions as distress and as pain, right? It's all registered as some kind of pain that needs to be attended to quickly to ensure our survival. So we all know that this, you probably know by now, that this kind of resisting difficult emotions is actually counterproductive. You know, it's very productive if I have a cut and I need to take care of it and stuff, but it's not helpful when we are dealing with difficult emotions. It actually leads to more psychological suffering. In fact, all psychological suffering that we humans experience is kind of a result of this survival mechanism. It's just because we're hardwired for survival and not for happiness. So we're all in the same boat, and this is why I think it's helpful to learn about what I'm going to teach you, so that you also know, hey, it's not my fault, and this kind of relearning is something that pretty much every human being has to go through because of our physiology. So, and you may have noticed a particular pattern, like you say I'm going to use the example of sadness, for instance, that you feel sad at a loss. Maybe you've lost, there's an end of a relationship, or someone has passed away, or you've lost an activity that you can no longer do that was precious to you, or some other kind of loss. And then the natural response of our system is sadness, right, or to grieve. And like maybe you've noticed that, oh, I shouldn't be feeling like this because I need to push it away, because if I let in all this sadness, then I'm just going to be sad all the time and I won't be able to function anymore, and this sadness guy is just going to move in and there won't be space for joy. And we basically hold fears around difficult emotions that, stop us from feeling them, right? Perfectly normal. And in the worst case situation, if we say suppress very normative sadness or grief for a long time, we may actually notice that over time we become depressed, right? For instance. So we just know what we resist persists, and it could lead to more suffering. So what I'm going to put forward to you is a kind of metaphor and a model for how to approach these difficult emotions instead. So the first step is to do the complete opposite. You might think I'm crazy. Trust me, it's tried on myself and lots of other people. And again, we've got the research to support it, but only do this if you really feel ready for it and you're not struggling with super, super intense, overwhelming emotions, particularly none of those that are associated with a traumatic experience. I wouldn't advise that at all. I'm talking about very everyday difficult emotions that I've just described. So number one is to become curious about it instead of pushing it away, right? So imagine the difficult emotion is like a visitor, maybe an unwanted visitor that's coming to your house, and your house is your body. So the normal response is visitor knocks at your door, knock, knock, anyone home, and our resistances get activated automatically, and it may be like, no, go away, we pull down the shutters, we turn off the lights to pretend nobody's home, or we turn up the music really loud so we can't hear the visitor knocking, all kinds of forms of resistances. Still, the visitor keeps knocking and it does not go away, right? So what we could do instead is to become curious. Who's actually in front of the door, right? So we can ask, hello, who's there? And we may get a response. The visitor may say, hi, it's sadness. And that helps us to calm our brains literally by having some label for the experience. Not overanalyzing it and why, but just a simple label. And we can then continue by maybe looking through the spy hole and looking at this visitor. What does he actually look like? I might have a very distorted idea of a very threatening somebody, and it's just, a little sad creature, maybe. So this is a really important first step, to become curious, to explore the experience. That helps calm our brains. And in the second step, we then may feel ready, if we have the time and the resources and the necessary awareness of our bodies. This is really important, that we do body scans, meditation, moving meditation, to really be comfortable to feel our bodies and to be out in our bodies. So if we do have this skill, then we can say, okay, I'm gonna let you into my house, but only into the hallway, into the landing, not any further. And this allows us to kind of explore the visitor some more, get to know this visitor, this emotion some more. And we do get to know him or her more by feeling the difficult emotion more in our bodies, because remember, the house is our body. So if I let it into the hallway or the landing, it actually increases the discomfort because I feel more of the sensations associated with the emotion. So in the case of sadness, I may suddenly feel a heaviness in my chest. I may feel a sort of like a wave of tiredness overcoming me, or heaviness. I may have this impulse of kind of wanting to curl up, So that increases our discomfort. And this is why we call this stage tolerating, because we really have to hold our seat also mentally to say, okay, this is part of the journey. It's not going to make things worse. Because normally we then throw out the visitor at this stage, because our system, again, our organism says, oh my God, more pain. You've got to fight this. You've got to get rid of it. Stop it, or flee from it or freeze or whatever. So it's normal that we would then want to throw out the visitor again. However, what's really important to understand is that if we tend to these difficult emotions and we allow them to flow through our bodies, they actually kind of disappear. because they're just messengers who want to help us. Actually, I'll come to that in a minute. But we don't know that normally. We have to actually go through that fear that we often have, and experience what I'm describing here directly for ourselves, to trust that they're not going to damage or hurt us. And and you can check out what kind of fears you actually hold about difficult emotions that would make you throw out the visitor again, instead of allowing them to stay in your body and in your house. So the most common ones often I've heard of is that, we're afraid of the visitor, or the sadness in this case, like taking over a whole house, maybe throwing out the furniture and stopping us from functioning in daily life, because it's just all sadness, and they're going to move in, get themselves very comfortable and never leave again, right? And maybe some people even worry if it's to do with anger, that this kind of emotion is going to just blow up the house and just destroy what we've built for ourselves, right? This is very scary, these fears of being overwhelmed or taken over by difficult emotions and not being able to function again. But they are just beliefs, about something that may happen, and we can test them out. So what I invite you to do, actually, if it feels safe enough to do, is then to go and move into the next phase, which is to allow the sensations associated with this emotion to freely move through your body. So really allowing this visitor to move through all the different rooms in your house as he or she wants, not how you would want them to behave, and to simply observe what happens. Now, this is difficult because all the fears that I've just mentioned may get triggered. Oh my God, what's going to happen if, what are they going to do? Are they going to, oh my God, and now this is like my fancy, porcelain cups from my grandma, or I don't know, they're going to destroy everything. So anyhow, all the different fears get massively triggered, and we need the compassion for ourselves to stay in our bodies whilst this is happening, and to be lovingly supportive of ourselves, to reassure ourselves, to encourage ourselves, to comfort ourselves, whatever. To have this compassionate presence, like a good friend who's, holding our hand, so we can kind of hold our own hand whilst we're going through this. And what's also helpful to kind of trust in that process is that we know that emotion is simply energy in motion. Right? So it wants to move, and it wants to move us and move through us to kind of release something, usually, or to release itself. So for instance, what could happen if I let myself feel the sadness more fully is that maybe I notice how, I want to give in to this impulse to want to curl up. And that the heaviness does get bigger. Maybe it takes up even not just my chest, but also my belly. Maybe I feel cold and chilly. And maybe there's a lump in my throat that I allow to kind of move up, and maybe it's moving up through my eyes, and tears come running down my face because I'm no longer trying to squash it down, right? So I may be crying, which is the most natural release or expression of sadness after a loss. And this kind of withdrawal and kind of contraction, and what I've just described, it's just the physiological expression of sadness and grief. And so I just allow that to happen, and I make sure I feel safe where I am, and I really allow the visitor to do its thing on his or her own terms and on his or her own time as well. I don't try to say, come on, you've had enough time now, you should be finished by now. I really allow it and trust it, and once that is complete, and usually, I don't know about you, actually my experience is the less I resist difficult emotions, I mean, this is training, of course, because we have to learn to trust them and have the confidence that we can be there to support ourselves through it, the shorter they last. I'm not making any promises here, no guarantees, no money back guarantees, but you know what I mean? There's something in there that we can begin to trust. And of course, there is this issue about, say, if it's to do with crying and things, that we can feel shame, and there can be parts of us saying, oh, you shouldn't be crying, you're weak, and things like that, which is kind of a separate topic. But of course, that's also something we can learn to say, hey, this is just the most natural expression of being human after a loss, and I allow myself to be fully human, right? So now we can get to the best stage that most of us don't get to, because we throw out the visitor when we could be tolerating the sensations associated with the emotions. And this is so great, because this is the actual harvest of this whole process, which is tough as well. It's difficult. It takes strength and courage to go through this. And so the final stage is what we call befriending the difficult emotion. Now, this may sound very idealized and Disney-like, I'm not sure. But in fact, say, if I stick to my example of sadness, once the sadness has moved through us and we feel a sort of relief, we may actually get this kind of a message of, we already experienced the message of self-care, which is included in it, which is like saying, hey, you've lost something that's important to you. I want you to move through it, to feel it, to acknowledge that it was important to you, to take the time to withdraw and grieve and mourn, instead of like pretending it didn't happen and be really active and stuff like that, so that you can shed this pain, lighten your heart, and eventually maybe move into, kind of approach something new again, and regain strength, right? So it's really trusting this kind of process. There's a beautiful message for self-compassion, self-care, inherent in this difficult emotion, that I can only really experience and understand and grasp if I do have this friendly interaction with the emotion. So once the visitors kind of move through all the rooms in my house, maybe we then, and I'm still in my house, I haven't left, of course, because I've got all the compassion and the skills to be in my house, and we may get to sit down for a cup of tea and a biscuit or coffee and cake, if that's what in my culture we do, coffee and cake. So we sit down and we kind of can take a new look at this messenger and maybe be grateful and notice how we've lost all these fears that we had earlier, and just maybe even be grateful for the message. And then normally these messengers leave, because all they wanted to do was to deliver the message, which is to feel the emotion and then trust this physiological process of release. And next time sadness knocks on our door, we won't be as scared, because we already know and are more familiar with this particular emotion. So it's actually a kind of teaching of beginning to lose our fear of these difficult emotions, become more familiar with them, and really help ourselves to stay with them in our bodies, instead of trying to fight with these beliefs by thinking about them. This is going to make it completely unmanageable. So this is also part of our normal reaction if we buy into the beliefs, right? We're going to really go into these worries about what may happen if we feel the sadness. And this, in fact, can create or can exacerbate any anxiety that we have. And that can feel like this all-enveloping threat, and that can happen. And that's actually what many of you will recognize. And so it's very important, and I'm just going to emphasize this again, it's very important to be able to drop into our bodies, because if I'm trying to catch the fear and the sadness as thoughts, as beliefs, it's impossible, because they're so quick and they're all over, and they can multiply in split seconds and become huge, right? They're kind of I can't grasp them. Whereas the sensations associated with sadness or fear, I can localize them in the body. They become manageable, literally, because I can place a hand there if my heart's heavy, or I can feel the fear in my belly. So I can hold it in a loving way, very directly. And these sensations move more slowly than thoughts, right? So this is also very important to know, that being able to feel your body is absolutely key, and maybe also to begin to train in self-compassion bit by bit. So if you want to train in self-compassion, and you want to train particularly in this practice, I mean, there's actually a practice that was developed by Germer and Kristin Neff for it, then you can check out this recording for free in the description box below, which is called Soften-Soothe-Allow, and it works really well with these kind of everyday soft emotions like anxiety or shame or sadness, loneliness. If we're dealing with anger, I have a whole different program called Fierce Self-Compassion, Empowering Yourself in the Face of Harm and Injustice. It's a bit more of an advanced program where you can learn how to transform anger into something that really helps to set boundaries and protect yourself against harm and injustice. And if you're kind of saying, well, I hear this talk about self-compassion, self-love, but I'm just, I have so many beliefs that tell me I'm not deserving, or I don't matter, and it's just really, really hard to do that. Please check out my other new program called Self-Compassion Made Easy. And if you are a clinician, a mental health clinician who is actually interested in learning how to integrate self-compassion in your one-to-one therapy, and you're really interested in helping people overcome the obstacles that I just mentioned, particularly those who have high shame, who have maybe attachment trauma, maybe have low mentalizing, then please also check out my program, Self-Compassion in Clinical Practice. All these programs, live and online, you will find below in the description box. And if you visit my online academy and you use the coupon code COURAGE, you will get a discount on all these courses. So thank you very much for listening, and I wish you a happy rest of your day.